This week, we're very honored to have with us our first official guest, Mr. Budjette Tan. We're so glad and happy to have you with us. How are you doing there? And Budjette is joining us from Copenhagen, and he happens to be the writer-creator of Trese, which is a supernatural comic series which incorporates many fascinating elements of local Filipino mythology.
Yeah, well, thanks again for inviting me. It's great to be hanging out with fellow geeks, especially during this lockdown phase. So it's always great to especially meet new geeks and just geek out on everything that we love. So thank you very much for inviting me. And yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard when people ask me what I think makes Trese different. I guess, I mean, especially when me and Kajo Baldissimo, who is my partner and co-creator and the artist, of course, of Trese, created it. We just really wanted to tell the stories that we grew up with. But give it a different twist. Growing up in the Philippines, even in Manila, we heard a lot of stories about aswang and tikbalang and tiyanak and the nuno sa punso. I mean, even though we were in the city, every time we see a mound of dirt, on a street corner or or if you were passing through an open lot with a mound of dirt, I would be told you have to say tabi-tabi po, which is you're asking permission to pass through. Because supposedly on that mound of dirt might just be the house of a duende or a nuno. So you have to ask permission, because if you don't ask permission, you can get sick, supposedly. So it just felt like, and when my relatives and my family would talk about it, it was very matter of fact. It wasn't like they were making it up. It was like, there is a duende, there is a duende, there is a duende.
As you guys can tell, I'm not Filipino. I live here in Manila, though, and I've been living here for the past going on 10 years now.
Wow.
And I remember when I first came here, I was going to Comic-Con, and I ended up picking up the first Trese book. This was 2000 and maybe 2013 or so. I picked up the first Trese book, and I read the first story about the white lady, the murdered white lady. So I read it, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting, but I had no reference. I didn't realize that this was something that people really believed in, and it was like a culture of folklore. I was just sort of, reading it, and then I was having my friends read it to me, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I was working at a school at that time, and I was teaching, and I was just kind of joking about it because I knew about it from Trese lang. Yeah, and I'm like, oh yeah, the aswangs, and the lady with the half body and the white lady, and I was making these off the cuff references to this comic book I read, and my coworkers were not feeling it. They were like, no. So one time I was talking to my buddy Noel, and I was like, yeah, man, I remember a couple of years ago, I was trying to make these jokes about aswangs, I read the comic book, and like people were not feeling it. And we had a friend that really, really took it seriously. So coming from a Western perspective, we totally understand fantasy. We understand fantasy more than anybody because the West isn't one culture. It's a mix of cultures. So we've got Thor, we've got the Greek Olympians. So we kind of absorb all these different fantasies and we put them in a category called fantasy. But I realized that the whole Filipino fantasy hasn't crossed the threshold of being laughed at. So I wanted to ask you, as a creator, have you ever had, since the story's so popular, have you had people that truly believe in the aswangs be like, so is this what's really happening? Like, have you had that experience?
Or it's worse, it's people coming to me and saying, oh, that happened to you too. Yeah, they're thinking, thankfully, I have not seen an aswang, I have not seen a ghost. I've just been surrounded by people who keep saying these things. But we've had readers come up to us and say stuff like, it must have really happened to you because this is what happened to me. And then they would get into detail about some supernatural encounter. or happened to their father or grandfather. So yeah, it's a very real experience as far as like living in the Philippines is concerned.
Yes, I mean,
Yeah,
Someone
yeah, yeah.
somewhere has
Yeah.
seen it.
I mean, yes.
Well, last year I was part of the main cast and one of the directors of the interactive theater show Tipsy Tales Presents Lambana.
Yes.
Do you
Okay.
do you
Yeah.
remember that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
we
Yes.
tied into Trese at least once because we had like the Trese quiz night.
Yes.
And
Yes. Of course.
yes, there was cosplayers and so on that went there. And being a show about making Filipino folklore and mythology come to life, we of course had a lot of people. Like there's a lot of crossover between, of course, the two mediums, the Trese comic book and our theater show. And I played like the Nuno sa Punso in that show.
Wow.
Okay.
That must have been real.
You're
So
a bit tall for a Nuno, but yeah, fine. It's
yeah,
There's a lot
so
of
my
squatting
line
involved.
was whenever anyone would ask that is I would ask them. I can't do the voice and stuff because the owners are still my friends. They might get mad,
Okay.
infringing on their copyright
Yeah,
because
yeah.
my character is they own that. But I would say like, oh, so you've seen a Nuno in real life? They've said no. Then how would you know I'm too large for a Nuno? I would do that because the whole point of the show would be like everything is real. Like you
Yeah.
forget that you came from the mall and stuff.
Yeah.
Like sometime within the show, you're like, this is all just real. And we
Yes.
had to be as real as possible. So whenever someone would say something like that, it had to be real. It's like it had to be like a response the actual Nuno would say to them.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, that's so cool.
But
I wish I could have visited or like,
yeah, unfortunately, the whole
experience
world
some-
situation happened, and it had to close down for a while. So, but I was wondering. I knew about Trese before that, but being around people who knew a lot about the book on a consistent basis, I found out a lot more while doing that part, and I noticed like there is there some religious iconography since you're Filipino and Catholicism and all that is huge in our country. Like for example, in the birth order of the main character, like she's the sixth daughter of the sixth and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I noticed the 666 number in there. So was that on purpose? And is there a lot of like Catholic and so on religious iconography in Trese aside from the Filipino folklore and things like that?
If ever there is, it was never. I'm not so sure how conscious I was of putting it in there. The whole sixth child of the sixth child is a riff of that old saying of the seventh child of the seventh child is the lucky one, or that the seventh child of the seventh child is the chosen one, right? So yeah. It was my friend and fellow writer JB Tapia who said maybe she's the sixth child of the sixth child. And again, that the whole connotation of like the number of the beast, that there is or at least it's just two numbers,
Mark
not
of the
yet
beast.
3 6s.
That's
We
the
don't
mark
know.
of the beast there.
But I mean, yeah, I mean to Filipinos and to people who believe. I mean, the numbers 13 and 666 and the number 4 to the Chinese are
Yes.
also have these beliefs around them and connotations. So I guess I was just taking advantage of when people hear that number and even her name again. To most Filipinos, it is supposedly unlucky. But yeah, there's a certain
Right.
batch of people out there who think it's a lucky number. So I guess I was just working with those conventions. And what I did realize, so it's interesting that Fred said that he read it, enjoyed it, even though he didn't have that whole backstory to it. And that's what I've found really amazing, is that every time we get feedback from people outside of the Philippines who've read it, they've enjoyed it and it made them dig more into the storyline, because my assumption was this comic book would never leave the little circle of geeks in Manila. So we never if you take a look at it, we never bothered to explain what a tikbalang was, what an aswang was. and we just, because my assumption was everyone knows the people who will pick this up, and I as you might have heard in one of my other stories, is that when we first printed Trese, we only printed 30 copies because we didn't think it would sell. So I thought, okay, I'll just print 30 copies. I think 10 of my friends bought them. The other 20 we sold in a comic book store. So I was really just thinking of, I'm sure, the people who pick this up grew up with the same stuff and urban legends and belief system that we have, or at least are familiar with it. So I never took the time to really explain stuff in detail, and somehow that contributed to why people like Trese. It's suddenly they feel like they're in on a joke, and they know the backstory to these things, and that's why it's part of the appeal. At least that's the feedback I get from readers.
Yeah, that's a very interesting, actually. Like, you've come a long way with this series, and you've been doing this for quite a while. And I was also very curious, what have been the most, challenging things creatively for you as someone who has been independent with Trese this whole time?
For me, it's always going back to, of course, from a creator standpoint, it's making the next story. It's always hard. I made a list. I made a list of stuff that I wanted to tell on the first time we started to talk about this. Me and Kadjo, for that matter, because again, the grand plan was we were going to do this on a monthly basis, and we were pretty successful on our first year. After the first 2 years, we kind of slacked off. But anyway, so we made a list of the stuff we wanted to tell. So I had that list on a notebook and in the back of my head, but somehow, you're not picking up the noise from outside the room, right? Are you?
No, it's fine. It's silent.
The kids. That's creepy.
Sorry.
There's the creepy haunted kids. Don't worry. It's part
It's the house. It's the house.
Supernatural.
It's the house. He lives in the Trese house.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I should have said. It was
Exactly right. It's the house.
You're in the mall.
It's demanding again.
Right?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
no,
Like
sorry.
you're in the mall. The little baby's in the mall.
I should have just stuck to that. That's a better story, Fred.
Yeah.
No. My 4-year-old boy just discovered Mega Man on Nintendo, so he's playing that.
Neat.
That was a childhood favorite of mine.
Yeah, the Switch is a child's best friend right now.
Telling a story. So telling what's the next story I want to tell is the difficult part. I think. I think that's it's from a writer standpoint, from a creator standpoint, it's still, what do I tell next, and am I doing this right, I guess, is the story. I mean, thankfully I worked on another project back in 2013, and it's a book called The Lost Journal of Alejandro Pardo, and it was under Summit Media, Summit Books. And I worked with that with a bunch of friends, including Kadjo and David Hontiveros, who's another comic book writer and novelist, along with artists Kadjo, Bo Guerrero, and Mervin Malonzo. And we were asked by Summit to come up with a book that essentially compiled creatures from Filipino folklore. But and of course we've the main inspiration, or the man who put the first books together, is Maximo Ramos. So Maximo Ramos, back in the 60s, had done a series of studies and had sent his students out to the provinces to collect, stories from the provinces about our beliefs and folklore, and what kind of aswang do you have over there, or are you an aswang?
We actually used his books as reference for our show.
This was like your Necronomicon then, huh?
Yeah. He had tons of volumes, right? It's like a lot.
Okay.
He had tons of volumes, thick ones.
Wow.
And the funny thing is that they're not if you want to get them, you have to go all the way to Quezon City to the publishing house, because the publishers are not distributing the books anymore for some weird reason. But
It's the Necronomicon.
They're communists. They're the Necronomicon. They're volumes, Fred. Volumes.
Can't give it out.
There is. I'll go off on a tangent and I'll come back to talking about the Pardo book. There was another fellow author who interviewed me, and he wrote. He's gonna kill me. I'm forgetting his full name now. But he wrote a book about essentially he wrote a book in the Filipino context of defense against the magical arts, of like, if you get kung nakulam ka, what do you do? So he said when he wrote that book,
Neat.
he brought it to the printing press, and the printing press broke down 3 times and could not print the book. It was as if someone was preventing that book from being published.
Wow.
It was too real.
No way.
Yeah.
That's
Your friend is too good.
Yeah, he got it.
He's too good. He got it way too right.
So because of the Pardo book, I ended up reading or rereading the Maximo Ramos books, because back in college I only read one book, and turns out, yes, he had written like volumes of this.
Yes.
So for me, it was fantastic to do this research and do the book. So for me now, it's like there were certain creatures I want to go back to and find a way that, I made a list of like, I want Trese to encounter this creature and that creature. So it's just figuring out, when to do it. And of course, one of the main questions I ask in writing a Trese story is, the assumption, of course, is that all of these creatures were when their stories came up, they were the stories told by our relatives in the province, by our grandparents, or that they were all based in the countryside. So the question is, did they move to the city, and what are they doing now in the city? And it is the same question that Neil Gaiman asked when he wrote American Gods. And that was one of the, as much as I love the epic quest that that Shadow went through in that novel, one of my favorite vignettes was, it showed that the Egyptian gods of death, of the dead, now run a funeral parlor somewhere in in Middle America. So it was like, no one's worshiping these gods anymore. What do? They have to open up shop somewhere. So that was the same question I applied. So again, the Nuno. So if there are no more, termite mounds on the streets, where does the Nuno move? And hence that image of maybe it started to hide under manholes. So that has become the game, I guess, we play. We take a character that supposedly was found on like country crossroads, or like at and where have they moved now in the city? So that's the little fun we have. And suddenly for people, when people do read it, it's like they go, yeah, that's where they would be hiding now.
Yeah,
so,
it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that's and like one of my when I used to work in the ad agency in Manila, so my boss bought a copy of the book, and in one of the stories is that I wrote that there's now a horde of Tiyanak under a mall, or that they hide out in the basement parking of a mall. And then my boss said, because of you, I can't park at the basement of a mall anymore.
Yeah.
Nice.
Trece, of course, is the Spanish word for 13. But as far as and of course, for Pinoys, that's how we call our number. I mean, we either say it in Tagalog or in Spanish. Trece also happens to be, my dad used to run or was part of Channel 13 in Manila.
Takes me back.
So growing up, whenever he would have meetings with his staff in the house, that's the word I would always hear, kamusta na Trese? Ano na nangyayari sa Trese? So it just sounded like it was a very familiar word as far as I'm concerned. And my dad did some really, popular TV shows on Channel 13, or produced them for that matter. So yeah, so for me, 13 has a connotation of, it's a lucky number as far as my family is concerned. But yeah, to a lot of other people, it's unlucky, and hence I guess that's part of the reason why. One of Trese's backstories, Alexandra Trese's backstory, is that she's the child of paradox and possibilities. That, will she bring bad luck to the city, or will she bring good luck to the city? It all depends on, essentially, will she go to the dark side or the light side?
Oh.
I just want to say, as a child of the 80s from the Philippines, I just love the fact that Teresa is pretty much directly inspired by Channel 13.
Wow.
I just want to say that.
It's quite a product of its time, I would imagine.
Very much. It's long gone, as you guys can notice. It's long gone.
I don't even know what shows
are some hot stuff back in the day.
Yes.
And that's a bit of a scoop. Okay, all right. So I've got a question that you might not be able to answer, but I know everyone's burning to ask this and get some sort of answer. When do you think we're going to actually be able to see Trese as a show on Netflix? When do you think it's coming out?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. You heard it here first, guys.
We're going to show the trailer now.
We're dying to know.
Dan Harmon. Remember Dan Harmon released that episode on April Fools because somebody was taunting him online. It would be great if you dropped the episode just because I asked.
It's on his phone. Quick.
He's like, you want an episode? There you go.
Very, very soon. Yeah, there's still, at the very least, I can say that there's still, that they are working on it, that thankfully, even with our current situation now, production is still ongoing.
Wow.
So yeah, we are just really waiting for the official word on when it can be announced. But yes, we hope to all get to watch it and binge watch it.
Awesome.
Okay, I got one more. I got one more question. How many episodes do you think we're going to get in a season?
You will, if you love books 1 to 3. There's a high chance you will get to see your favorite stories.
Okay.
I would love it if Trese season 1 had Trese episodes.
So
if it had Trese episodes, that would be great.
If there were Trese episodes.
If Trese had Trese episodes per season, that would be great. That would be great. That would be great, yeah, right?
That would make the
I would do that.
Call up Netflix now.
I would not think of any other number. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well,
it was the writers got. I wasn't involved in writing the episodes, but they did. Jay Oliva is of course our executive producer and showrunner.
Oh, Jay Oliva. Okay.
Yeah, he's great, right?
He's done a number of work for DC animated movies and
his story career.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's a great artist. I'm a fan of his work, and I'm glad he's on board with your series, Budjette. You should. I'm sure you're feeling proud and honored to have him aboard your team.
Absolutely.
Big deal.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's great that he does come from, that he is a comic book geek, and I think it is interesting that he has spent or grew up most of his time in the U.S. So he comes back to Manila every now and again. So he actually went back to Manila just to write the story of Trese.
Ooh.
So he and our producers put together a team. So there was a writing team that's based in Manila, and they spent a week together, a week or 2 weeks. Kadjo actually got to meet him in person. I didn't. I was, of course, in Denmark. So they got to meet. They got to talk about Trese. So I think, and I've seen the storyline. So I think they've done a pretty good job of, here's all of these books, which books and cases do you pick to create, a show? And I think they've. What I like about it is that if you've never heard of Trese at all, then it's a great intro to the world. And that if you have been reading Trese all these years, there will still be moments that will surprise you. So I think they, even when I was reading it, it was like, what did you do? Or like,
you bastards.
I was like reading, I was like, I did not see that coming, because I was already, I can't help but think, okay, I know where they're gonna go. This is what's gonna happen. And when I turn the page, I go, yeah.
Wow.
That's great.
I hope the long-time readers will still like it.
Oh, well, if they kept you in suspense, I'm sure they're going to be glued with suspense and intrigue with the end product.
Yeah, the bar's been met.
Yes. And it sounds like you have a great animation team working on this as well.
Yep, it's I think it's a team that Jay has worked with in the past. So yeah, he's definitely brought in what do you call this? Yeah, a team that he's really comfortable working with. So I've seen some of the art. Yeah, and so it was Jay and his art director that came to Manila. They took lots of photos. They actually spent one whole day just riding the MRT from station to station.
Wow.
And just just going down at certain spots and just to get a better feel of Manila. So yes, there will be a lot of scenes.
That's encouraging. I mean, that's
so we're gonna be watching the show, and we'll see characters, and we'll be like, I've been on that street corner. I've been on that corner.
Exactly.
I know that light post.
I hope so. Yeah, exactly. They showed. I mean, since I can't show anything, I'll just describe it. So they showed me this one. When they showed it to me, it looked like a painting, and it was like a really dingy, street corner with, like, how it is with our electrical cables that are just tangled up. And I was like saying, this is a great painting. And they said, no, that's the backdrop of the scene. So it was that detailed.
Nice.
So you can really feel, at least in that one scene, you could really feel, the grit and grime of Manila when you take a look at that crime scene, for that matter.
Mm-mm.
That's going to make a lot of people feel right at home while they're reading or watching, rather.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I Budjette, I wanted to say thank you for coming on to our show. Thank you for spending your time with us. I know you're busy. You gotta keep things moving. But hopefully, when Trese comes out, we can have you back on the show. When you're able to.
Oh hell yeah, that'd be great.
We can talk about season 2.
Yeah. You already have
Season 13. Season 13.
Yeah, you heard it.
you already got a.
Yes. That's a goal. I'm picking up a lot of ideas from you guys. That's fantastic. We should do this more often.
Yes.
Okay.
We're getting
How's your next week?
You
want
like
season
a really
2?
good
Wait,
feel of what's to come. A good
Season
foreshadowing
13.
of what's to come.
That's a good goal.
Thanks to you.
Okay. All right. So we're going to sign out. Thanks, guys, for being here. Thank you
to everybody.
Our co-host,
Yes.
Wendell,
Mhm.
Noel Blanco, and of course our esteemed guest, Budjette of Trese, and you will be seeing more of his work soon. And we'll see you guys next week on Talking Geek Weekly.
See you guys.
All right, guys.
Goodbye. Signing off.
Bye.
Goodbye, everybody.